Imagine dismissing an intern, thinking they're just another face in the crowd. Now, picture that decision coming back to haunt you, not as a small mistake, but as a career-altering, life-shattering twist. This is the story of Daniel Crawford, a man who thought he had it all. He was the CEO of Crawford Enterprises, a towering empire in the heart of New York City. His name was on the skyline, his wealth splashed across magazines, and his arrogance, well, that was unmatched. Daniel was feared more than he was respected. He believed in one thing: power. In his eyes, people weren't people. They were either assets or liabilities. And interns? To him, they were the lowest form of life in his empire. On a cloudy Monday morning, the elevator doors opened to the 47th floor, the executive wing. Interns scurried nervously, clutching notebooks and coffee trays. Among them was a quiet, almost unnoticeable young man named Elijah. He was soft-spoken, polite, and carried himself with a kind of humility that Daniel despised. The CEO walked into the boardroom, his presence like a storm cloud. Everyone stood. Elijah, caught off guard, fumbled with the projector cable. The screen blinked. Daniel's face twisted. "You," he snapped, pointing a finger at Elijah. The entire room froze. Elijah swallowed hard. I'm sorry, sir. Just give me a second to." "Pathetic," Daniel cut him off. His voice was sharp, slicing through the silence. "This is why interns don't belong in important meetings. You're wasting my time, and this company runs on time. You hear me?" The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some pitied Elijah, others smirked, relieved it wasn't them. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes narrowing like a predator. "Pack your things. You're done. Fired. Out." A gasp spread across the room. Fired? For fumbling a cable? But nobody dared to question him. Elijah's face burned, his chest tight. For a second, he looked like he might argue. But instead, he lowered his gaze, nodded once, and quietly walked out of the room. His footsteps echoed against the polished floor until the door clicked shut. Daniel smirked. "That's how you handle weakness," he declared to the board, puffing up his chest. "Crawford Enterprises is built on strength. I don't tolerate incompetence." The meeting continued, but an uneasy silence lingered. Outside, in the lobby, Elijah stood still, staring at the city skyline through the glass walls. There was no anger on his face. No tears. Just a calm that almost felt unnatural. And if Daniel had paid attention, if he hadn't been blinded by his ego, he might have noticed the faintest hint of a smile tugging at Elijah's lips. Because Elijah wasn't just an intern. And Daniel had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Days passed after Elijah's sudden dismissal. For Daniel, it was nothing more than a trivial event. Another intern gone, another lesson taught. He barely remembered Elijah's face. But for others in the company, whispers began to spread. "Did you hear what happened to the intern?" One secretary asked another in the break room. "Yeah, Daniel fired him on the spot, over nothing. Apparently, that kid was top of his class at Harvard. He didn't even need this internship. Some people say he's connected." "Connected?" The other woman raised an eyebrow. "To who?" But no one seemed to know. Daniel brushed it all off. "Rumors," he muttered when one of his executives mentioned it. "People always exaggerate." Yet, small things began to happen. Strange things. First, a deal worth $50 million suddenly collapsed. Their long-term partner, the Grayson Group, pulled out with no explanation. Daniel stormed into the office of his VP of Acquisitions. "What happened?" he barked. They didn't say, sir. Just pulled the plug." Then, one by one, other cracks began to show. Clients went silent. Shareholders grew restless. And for the first time in years, Crawford Enterprises' stock slipped. Daniel dismissed it as market turbulence. "It happens," he told himself. But deep down he felt it. Something wasn't right. Meanwhile, Elijah's name kept floating around like a ghost. Nobody saw him, but his absence was louder than his presence ever was. Janitors, assistants, even some executives, they all spoke of him in hushed tones. "Did you know he grew up in the Forster system, but graduated at the top of his class? I heard he already had offers from Fortune 500 companies, but he chose Crawford Enterprises. Why would he do that? Why here?" No one had an answer. One night, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse office. The city lights sparkled below, but for once, he didn't feel powerful. He felt hunted. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his reflection staring back at him in the window. A knock at the door. His secretary entered, nervous. "Sir, there's something you need to see." She placed an envelope on his desk. No return address. Just his name, written in neat, precise handwriting. Daniel opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "Every empire falls. Some crumble from the outside, but the most dangerous ones collapse from within." There was no signature, but Daniel's chest tightened. He knew. Somehow he knew. "Elijah," he whispered. The memory of the quiet intern, the calm look in his eyes, flooded back. That wasn't the look of a defeated man. That was the look of someone waiting. And for the first time in years, the great Daniel Crawford felt something he hadn't felt since he was a boy. Daniel couldn't sleep. For weeks, he had brushed off the nagging feeling that something bigger was happening. But now, staring at that cryptic letter, he knew this was no coincidence. The intern he fired, Elijah, wasn't ordinary. He called his head of security, a gruff ex-military man named Ross. "Find out everything about him. I don't care what it takes. Background, family, education, everything. I want answers." Ross nodded and left without a word. Hours turned into days. Daniel buried himself in work, but his empire was continuing to crack. More clients backed out. Competitors swooped in with uncanny timing. It was as if someone knew Crawford Enterprises inside and out. Every weak spot, every blind spot. Finally, Ross returned with a thick folder. He dropped it on Daniel's desk. "You might want to sit down for this, sir." Daniel frowned. "Just tell me." Ross opened the folder. Inside were pictures, transcripts, old news clippings. Elijah Reed, 23 years old. Top 1% of his class at Harvard. Dual degree in business and computer science. Offers from multiple Fortune 500 companies, all declined. But here's the kicker. Ross flipped to the next page. A photo of Elijah with a tall man in a tailored suit. Daniel's heart skipped. "That's Richard Gray." Ross nodded grimly. "CEO of the Grayson Group. Your biggest rival. And Elijah's godfather." Daniel's chest tightened. "Godfather?" Ross leaned in. "Not only that. Elijah's late father, Samuel Reed, was once a board member of Crawford Enterprises. Until you forced him out." The room fell silent. Memories flashed in Daniel's mind. Samuel Reed. Brilliant. Respected. But he had been too idealistic, too soft. Daniel had pushed him out during a hostile takeover years ago. A decision he had long forgotten. But Samuel Reed's son hadn't forgotten. "Elijah came here for a reason," Ross said quietly. "This wasn't about experience. It was about infiltration." Daniel's mouth went dry. He suddenly saw the puzzle pieces coming together. The timing of the lost contracts, the sudden leaks, the letter. It was all connected. "Elijah knew exactly what he was doing when he walked through those doors," Ross continued. "And when you humiliated him, when you fired him, you gave him fuel. Now, he's not just coming after you with smarts. He's coming after you with vengeance." Daniel stood, pacing the room. For the first time in his career, he felt like the prey, not the predator. "This is insane. He's just a kid." Ross shook his head. "No, sir. He's the son of a man you betrayed. He's the protege of your greatest rival. And right now, he's the most dangerous person in your world." Daniel's mind spun. He thought of the whispers, the clients abandoning ship, the mysterious timing of every collapse. This wasn't random. This was war. And Elijah Reed was winning. The boardroom was buzzing. Crawford Enterprises had just suffered its worst quarter in 2 decades. Board members whispered in tight circles. Investors demanded answers. And Daniel felt the weight of a crumbling empire pressing down on him. He entered the room, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He was still the CEO, still the man in charge. Or at least, he thought he was. Then the doors opened. In walked Elijah. Not in an intern's cheap suit anymore. No, this time he wore a sharp tailored jacket, confidence radiating from every step. He carried a slim folder and walked directly to the head of the table, Daniel's seat. "What the hell is this?" Daniel barked. "This is my board meeting now," Elijah said calmly, sliding the folder across the table. The directors leaned in as he spoke, his voice steady, sharp, commanding. "Crawford Enterprises has been bleeding money, losing contracts, and spiraling into chaos. And here's why." He opened the folder, revealing page after page of evidence. Because of Daniel Crawford's reckless leadership, his arrogance, and his inability to adapt. Murmurs filled the room. Daniel's face turned red. "You little." "Sit down, Daniel." Elijah cut him off. "You've had your turn. Now it's mine." The audacity stunned everyone. But Elijah wasn't finished. "You think you fired an intern," Elijah said, staring directly into Daniel's eyes. "But what you really did was awaken the son of Samuel Reed." The name hit the board like thunder. Gasps erupted. My father gave everything to this company, Elijah continued, voice cracking with emotion. And you, Daniel, destroyed him. You pushed him out, ruined his career, and left him with nothing. He died believing he was a failure. But he wasn't. You were. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. His empire, his power, his certainty, all of it seemed to slip away. Elijah leaned forward. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here to take back what should never have been lost. Crawford Enterprises is done under your name. It's time for new leadership. The board members looked at each other. One by one they nodded. Within minutes, the vote was cast. Daniel Crawford was removed as CEO. And in his place, Elijah Reed was appointed the youngest CEO the company had ever seen. Daniel staggered back, disbelief etched on his face. You can't do this. This is MY Company. Elijah stood tall, his voice steady. No, Daniel. This was my father's company. And now it's mine. Silence fell. The boardroom, once Daniel's kingdom, now belonged to Elijah. As Daniel walked out, defeated, broken, Elijah turned to the board. This isn't just about taking power. This is about restoring honor. And I promise you, under my leadership, we will rise higher than ever before. The room erupted in applause. But Daniel, standing in the hallway outside, clenched his fists. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. And as he looked back at the doors closing behind him, one thought consumed him. He hadn't just underestimated Elijah. He had created him.